Okay. Let me see. Also in attendance is John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. Patty Barry of the Deputy Treasurer, Tax Collector's Office. We do have several members from the city staff that will be speaking. Oh, yes, you're coming in. Alderman Ben Clemmings is also here. And we have several members from the city that are going to speak in turn, I think. So they can introduce themselves at that particular time. Seeing that, these city workers have already worked a full day. So I'll ask the courtesy of this committee to take items out of content, off the agenda in order. And I think the majority of them are here is to discuss the Colonial Ave. So I'll call for that vote because I just forgot something. We did the roll call, public comment. Anybody have any public comment? Okay, and the other housekeeping thing is, it's a big list, is communications. So could the clerk read the communications in the...
Communication from Alderman Jettie, petition to permit overnight parking on Colonial Ave. Communications from Sam Durfee, Planning Manager, referral from the Board of Aldermen on proposed resolution R-23-117, authorizing the sale of a tax deed property located at 7 Ponderosa Ave. Communication from Sam Durfee, Planning Manager, referral from the Board of Aldermen on proposed resolution R-23-182, authorizing the sale of a tax deed property located at 17 Jackson Street and L Bridge Street to Liberty Utilities. Communication from Wayne Husband, Senior Traffic Engineer, re O-23-064, opposition to allowing overnight parking on Colonial Ave. Communication from Wayne Husband, Senior Traffic Engineer, ordinance O-23-067, no parking on the west side section of Elm Street. And the final communication from Wayne Husband, Senior Traffic Engineer, ordinance O-23-068, traffic and parking changes and waters.
Okay, there being no objection, I'll accept the communications and place them on file. Unfinished business?
There is none.
New business resolutions.
Did you want to take up the
Yeah, without objections by members of the committee, may we go off the agenda and take Colonial Ave and discuss that. It is, what is the?
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, please do.
Sure, so I will move to recommend final passage of O-23-064, allowing permitted overnight on-street parking on Colonial Ave.
Okay. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Jettie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, since I became an alderman some 6 years ago, people on Colonial Avenue have asked me about allowing overnight parking. Basically, the problem that these people encountered was that they had experienced, especially during COVID, a return of children who had left the nest, but suddenly, or not so suddenly, but they eventually came back to the house with their vehicles, and there was not enough room in the driveway to accommodate these vehicles. So in order to get them off the street, they would sometimes park on the lawn, and in the wintertime, the lawn would become, the grass or the dirt would become, full of water, and they ended up, sinking into the lawn, and so they would, oftentimes park on the street, and they'd get ticketed, and so they were, complaining about that, and asking, whether there was some way that they could have overnight parking. There were At that time, they were told, when they asked, I think they initially went to the city clerk's office, and they were told that there was a list being maintained for people who wanted their streets to include overnight parking, and that they would be added to the list. Eventually, they were told that, that we were in the process of obtaining a parking study to study, parking overall in the city and, among other things, the overnight situation. And then, so that parking study took a number of years. It was delayed by COVID, but eventually the parking study was issued, I think in February of this year. It's almost a year ago. And during the parking study, when they had the ward meetings, one of the issues that came up was overnight parking. And during those ward meetings, there were some people who were interested in having overnight parking on their streets. There were other people who were adamantly opposed to having overnight parking on their streets. The consultant, when asked, said that that he thought that if people on a certain street were all in agreement that they wanted overnight parking, and it met other criteria, the street would be wide enough, it wouldn't cause any other issues. He saw no reason why it could not be allowed. So I, as this went on, I relayed this to these people, and so I told them if they wanted to be able to park overnight, they would have to get all their neighbors to agree to this, and so they did. They went out and got signatures, and I see that Colonial Avenue has shown up on the screen, and so you can see Colonial Avenue is a street that that runs perpendicular to Countryside Drive. It's in my ward, Ward 5. One side of the east side of Colonial Avenue is a dead end. There are only 3 houses on that section. One of them is on Countryside, the other 2 are on Colonial, but there are 3 houses altogether. And then on the west side, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 houses. And so these people went and visited all their neighbors, and everybody signed off on a petition which has been submitted to you, asking that overnight parking be allowed on Colonial Avenue. I talked to the police department, and the police department said police chief said that he had no problem with this. I spoke to the deputy fire chief, who consulted with the fire marshal, and the fire marshal said that he would prefer that it be parking only on one side of Colonial Avenue and not including the cul-de-sac. And initially, I spoke to the Board of Public Works, and the Assistant Director of Public Works initially told me that he didn't see any problem, but then later said that they had a concern about trash removal, and we've since received a letter from the traffic engineer saying that the Board of Public Works is against this. And the reason is, as you saw in their letter, the reason is that they think it would be a problem with trash removal and snow removal in other Board of Public Works operations. So, I want to point out that the current law, the current ordinance, does not prohibit overnight parking. What it does is it prohibits parking for more than 2 hours during the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. So theoretically, people can park on the street all day long, all night long, until 2 a.m., and remove their car and come back at 4 a.m. And be within the law. So the law, the way the law is today, really only prohibits parking for a 2-hour period. It's not overnight, it's 2 hours during midnight and 6 a.m. So when the Board of Public Works say they have a problem with trash removal, I said to the assistant director, you're not removing trash, between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. The soonest they get out there, is, theoretically 6 a.m., but they really don't get out till 7 a.m. So, it's, the trash removal is something that happens during the day. So under the current ordinance, people can still park there, during the normal trash removal times. So what these people are asking for, being able to park, during those nighttime hours, really isn't going to change the situation as far as trash removal is concerned. The other thing he mentioned was snow removal. And so during snow emergencies, you can't park on any street anywhere. And so even if this ordinance were approved, during a snowstorm, you can't park on the street anyway. So again, this change in the ordinance really wouldn't affect that. And when he says other public work operations, I don't know, what that might entail. But again, I think it's normally a daytime. The Board of Public Works, whatever they do during the daytime. So I can only imagine there would be some emergency situation which would arise where they would not want cars parked there. And, if there's an emergency, people are going to cooperate, I'm assuming, and not park there. So, I don't see that the objections of the Board of, the traffic engineer really apply. The parking, I tried talking to the parking enforcement person, and I got a call back from Director Cummings, and I've also spoken to the new Director of Economic Development, who's now in charge of parking enforcement. And they talked about, Director Cummings said that they really didn't have, as he put it, a dog in the fight, or maybe he said a horse in the race. I'm not sure which analogy he used, but one of those. But he said that that they would like to see a more comprehensive look at this, at the idea of allowing overnight parking in other than the downtown area. But we've been studying this, ever since I came onto your committee, Mr. Chairman. And I remember Alderman Lopez wanted.
Well, Alderman Jettie, you got to remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't take a long history of the city of Nashua that did not have overnight parking, and then all of a sudden just willy-nilly put it in. It's going to take ordinance changes, laws changes. This is the tip of the iceberg. We're not there yet. And can I ask you an additional question? Well, sorry that I interrupted you, but you led me to believe, am I accurate from what I thought I heard, that Andy Hill, who works for Desmond, which is our contracted services to look at this, that he approved this or says it's okay?
During the discussion, during the study, when he, when I talked to him personally and when he appeared before the committee and I think the full Board of Aldermen a couple of times, was asked whether or not individual streets could be considered for overnight parking. And the answer he gave me was, and the answer he gave the committee at the time, was that, if people on a certain street were, if the majority, he said, he didn't even say unanimously, but if the majority, agreed that they wanted overnight parking, and the other, the street was wide enough and it didn't interfere with other operations, that yes, he said that, on a street-by-street basis, that it could be approved.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Alderman Jettie, we do have other people, so I do thank you for your presentation. Do you have any additional testimony that you want to add?
Yeah, as I was saying, we've been studying this for a long time. These people, I think, have been very patient. They've done everything we've asked them to do. They're all unanimously in favor of this, and I would think we owe it to them. This is one street. It's dead end on both sides. It's they're all in agreement. It's not going to affect anybody else. And just like we have looked at streets on a individual basis, we look at stop signs, we look at one-way, we look at parking situations on a street-by-street basis. This is no different, and I think that I would like to see us grant these people's petition and add them to the list of streets where parking can be permitted during that midnight to 6 a.m. Time period for longer than 2 hours. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Alderman Jettie. Because we have, it seems, other people would like to provide testimony. So I guess you're up, Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Just one nuanced clarification I want to make about what was said, and I agree with a lot of what Alderman Jettie said in terms of his representations. For the most part, I believe our retained consultant, Andy Hill, made representations that what he would recommend is that the area be considered be quote unquote walkable, and so that wouldn't be one street per se. If you were to blow this out a little bit, he would recommend that you create like what he referred to as like a micro district, and so it wouldn't be just one street per se, but something that would be walkable or logical, because inevitably what you're going to have here per se, and I just want to point this out, is you may have some people on countryside starting to park on street, and they might ask, well, why can't I? Well, why can't we? And so that was the rationale and the logic, besides his other recommendations, which was, he said, to do it comprehensively, put some criteria together, make sure that criteria is known, so you're not taking this one-off type approach. And that's where he was coming from when he made his comments. Thank you.
Okay. We do have the other people, Alderman Clemmons, but I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I happen to agree with Alderman Jettie and everything that he has said. And I also agree with Director Cummings in that it would be nice to have a comprehensive plan in place to see the city move towards overnight parking and a permit program, which I have been in favor of for as long as I've been an alderman. Unfortunately, what we've had over the years is the downtown area got overnight parking and French Hill, the 3 streets in French Hill. And then we added piecemeal along the way, streets that were in that area. You know, an alderman would bring something forward, the Ward 4 alderman or the Ward 3 alderman would add a street here and there. And, you know, you saw that from time to time, but my opinion is that in this particular case, you have the entire, or most of the street anyway, wanting it. They're all signed that petition. And while I understand that it's an inconvenience for the Public Works Department, the way I look at this is we are the policy board here. And while I value their opinion and I value what they have to say, I think we're the ones that make the policy and they have to work around the policy that we make. And in my opinion, the policy should be trying to do this in other areas. And I think Countryside Drive is a great start, or I'm sorry, Colonial Drive is a great start to get this going, to move it to other areas in the city. So, you know, while I respect the concerns that were brought up, they're concerns that are mitigated in the parts of the city where the streets are the most narrow, where it's the hardest to plow, and we managed to do it. And we can certainly do it on a street like Colonial Drive, which is wider, less traveled, out of the way. So I'm not on the committee, but I'm going to support this wholeheartedly. And I hope that it moves forward at the Board of Aldermen and in this committee tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, but Alderman Clemmons, thank you for that. But because of the piecemeal, and I think I want people from the city in the audience to provide a backup to like what I'm saying. There was no guidance, and we're working on this particular guidance. And so many streets that were approved right now are going to have to be taken a look at. Because they were done, we will have to grandfather them, but we'll allow those to be grandfathered, but then for the same conditions on a street, 2 streets over, we're going to have to say no, because they don't meet the criteria. Now, what is the criteria? We're still working on that. You know, I just want the public to understand, nobody's sitting in a lounge chair all summer and not doing anything. There's been a lot of people going to meetings that I haven't seen the full Board of Aldermen at, and working with Mr. Hill and everything else like that to come up with viable solutions for this problem. And the target was, from Mr. Hill, was to say, there's places like, in documentation, that Ward 5 may not want overnight parking. Not all wards want it, but there's a need and want in Ward 4 and 3 because of the congestion and everything else. So we got to take our time. Because, Alderman, I just want other members of the committee to understand this. Once this particular cat gets out of the bag, you're not going to hold the tiger by the tail. So I, would like to say, I would like to do it and do it right instead of trying to fix something piecemeal with bubblegum. I wanted to have a good standalone policy that this will, that's what we're in charge of, that this will meet the test of time.
May I respond?
Yes, you may.
Then you know what? Then what I would like to see then come out of this is that we pass this ordinance, and maybe that'll get a fire lit under people to get it done, because we've been asking for this for 6 years and we haven't gotten anything. So you know what? Otherwise, we're just going to keep passing things piecemeal. Because we have the say on this board.
Alderman Clemmons, thank you for your comments. But I think members of the committee, like you say, for 6 years, have diligently worked on this. If you were a member of the committee, you would know that. Okay? I don't want the people to get the impression that we're not doing our due diligence. And it'd be unfair of you to accuse the committee of such. But you are entitled, sir, to your particular opinion, but I find the committee doing due diligence on this particular matter. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open it up next to people from the city so they could discuss this. So to provide good information to the committee. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time. My name is Matt LeBlanc, the Operations Manager with the Division of Public Works. Again, thank you for having and hearing me out on this. But I am here speaking on behalf of Public Works tonight to oppose this overnight parking on Colonial Ave. I could speak for quite some time, but I'm gonna get right to it. I've heard, that there was some such issues, that we can work around, but quite honestly, overnight, we plow snow all night long, so there's no telling what time it starts and stops. We have had many issues, and I'm not just saying here on Colonial, but we need, it's one thing to say that they should be off the streets, but the fact is, they're not. We pick up trash on Colonial, and we went to automated trash collection years ago, as many of you guys know. We could very easily send one person with an automated trash collector to get this, but due to the volume of traffic on that street, either side of the dead ends, we actually send a trash packer out there with 2 employees. So again, we went to try to do automated trash collection, and instead we're sending 2 people out there instead of 1. Our street sweepers, they start at 2:45 in the morning. Again, there's another area that we have a hard time getting because people parked out on that street. We really don't want to set the precedent that we're going to start these parking issues all over town, because where does it actually stop? Once you let one, then everybody's neighbor is going to want the same thing all through town, and it is going to impede our process of doing things. And again, there's certain hours. We work 3 different shifts all throughout the city, so it's hard to say, what we need to do on Colonial at what time. But we're plowing snow there. We do have issues with trash collection over there, not just there, but right off of Gilson Road is Tammy Caitlin. We're trying to go all fully automated as much as possible, but it's harder and harder to do with all these people parked everywhere. So as of now, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll let the people in the audience come up and next, if you would like to speak. Please again state your name and.
Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. Just so you know that the piecemeal part of this is important, but this area specifically of the community will not be on that overnight comprehensive list. So we're looking at much different areas of town, so this is not going to be recommended for overnight parking, even with the comprehensive approach, just so you're aware.
Okay. Additional speakers from this audience? Nobody? Okay. Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I certainly empathize with the Ward 5 alderman. We try to do things for our constituents on a regular basis and make life easier for them. I certainly understand that, especially during COVID, when the kids return, and these are big houses, so they may have had a lot of kids that went off to college, that there are additional cars. But I have a few concerns. One is, these are very large homes, and if you get to the close-up, you would see that some of their driveways are huge.
No, they're not.
So I don't know how many cars, you would have to park before you filled up the driveway. The other thing is that doing this a street at a time causes issues. Again, there'll be people in this whole neighborhood say, well, it's okay, they're parking there and they're not getting ticketed. How come I'm getting ticketed? that presents a problem probably for the Ward 5 alderman, because then you'd have to explain that, you know. So the other thing is that as we just heard from DPW, right now we're short plow drivers. We're short trash pickup drivers. Anything that delays them in their course of what they're doing is going to be an issue for a lot of people. And if we, at this point in time, allow this, then it's much like, trying to solve a puzzle one piece at a time. I agree that I think we ought to look at it comprehensively across the entire city or entire zones, so that we don't get into some of the issues that I just mentioned. So as much as I empathize with the people in wanting to park there, I think back in my day, sold houses on that street, and they're large homes and there's plenty of room. And as far as the timing, I think the ordinance way back when it was originally passed was made so that people could have people over for dinner or for a small party and park in front of their homes without worrying about getting ticketed, and then they had to leave by 2 in the morning. Maybe that ordinance needs to be changed as far as the time is concerned, based on today's automated trash pickup. The fact that we don't always have 2 people in plows anymore, and if they're trying to go around cars, they might hit them. I know we lose enough mailboxes as it is. So in this instance, I'm just not ready to take one street at a time. I think we need to look at it more comprehensively. I will agree that we've been waiting for the traffic study for a long time. And I think there were some reasons why it got delayed, but I think we need to grab the bull by the horns and do something citywide with the traffic study, and as a full board, come up with a plan that works. So at the moment, I am not in favor of granting this one exception, because I think it's just going to add more problems than it solves.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan. Director Sullivan, excuse me.
Mr. is just fine. Good evening, members of the committee. Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. I have a bit of a rhetorical question for the committee, and perhaps it is a topic that goes beyond this committee's consideration of the legislation this evening. But when I review Colonial Ave on both sides, on the cul-de-sac and on the other portion, and I look at the structures there, and I review the driveway size and the garages that exist, some of which conform with the zoning ordinance, some of which do not. Nearly all of those properties provide between 3 and 4 parking spaces on just paved area on the properties themselves. And then many do actually offer garage parking. I think we all know that the garages tend to take on an alternative use over time as we store things in our properties. But I'm struck myself and am asking the question of why, in fact, this change is being requested based on the usage of these properties. The city has regulations in place that spell out a minimum parking standard. They don't often spell out a maximum parking standard, but I do wonder whether or not it's reasonable for a resident or a single-family residential home to have more than 4 vehicles on the site. I think that's a bigger policy question for discussion, but this leads me to this question because clearly we're seeing more demand than can be accommodated on the lot. And I'm not going to make the argument that piecemeal changes shouldn't be considered, although it sounds like perhaps that isn't the right thing to do here. But I do have policy concerns, I guess, about homes that have more than 4 cars that are being accommodated. So I throw that out as a rhetorical question, I guess, but I do have a concern about this sort of reaction to vehicle surplus on the properties in this particular location, And I'm not sure that legislation is the appropriate way to address that issue.
Alderman Clemmons, there was a rhetorical question, so hopefully no rhetorical debate. Thank you.
Do I have
Alderman
the floor?
Clemmons.
Yeah, I mean, rhetorically, you could have 5 children, so you could have 5 cars. You could have a big family, rhetorically.
Don't disagree.
Mr.
Director Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. An effort to try to maybe move this idea along and to try to put a little bit more positivity to it, especially during this holiday season time that we're in. What I would offer and what I would recommend to this body is right after the first of the year, when the new body gets sworn in, I'd be happy to host a public working group session where we can come together, discuss some of these more finer technical points together as a group, and that would include departments as well as members of the Board of Aldermen, and we can actually work through some of the nuanced details that were actually provided to you in a framework by Andy Hill. And so it may take us a session or 2 or 3 to get there, but I believe that that would be a positive, constructive step to have some of these more finer point discussions. So you're not feeling the time pressure like this evening to work through these details during a committee on infrastructure when you know you have other matters in business to attend to. So I offer that to you. I will give you that commitment. I'd be happy to do that. And then we can come back to you and see how we do in terms of formulating something that hopefully everyone can be proud of. If everyone was to come together, I think we could get the spirit of cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cummings. That was well stated, and would be looking forward to that. Did you? Yes, Alderman Lopez.
While this isn't in my ward, I definitely am sympathetic to the issue. I don't really feel a time crunch tonight since we've been waiting for 6 years, and this includes people who have to walk to and from the parking garage and other even more remote places just to pick up their car in the morning. So it is a hardship, especially in the urban areas. Can't necessarily say that I understand the situation fully here as being the same, but I do know that people would like, if their children are going to be staying with them, and we're using the word children, we all understand these are adults that can drive a car, then maybe they do want to make sure if it's not doing any harm and their neighborhood says it's okay, that they be allowed to use the roads in that particular manner. I think that's important to remember because it was stated earlier tonight that this neighborhood is not going to be on the existing framework. It has taken us 6 years to talk about the downtown overnight parking program. I don't know how many decades it'll be if we start talking about citywide and going through all those things, but I'm not optimistic based on what I've seen. And I was on the committee when we first did this for my first 2 terms as alderman, and I have attended all but I believe one of the discussions and presentations on this, as have multiple other Board of Aldermen members. This isn't something that the Board of Aldermen haven't been, participating. I think we've been very gracious in waiting for solutions to be proposed and things to be moved forward. Again, not really a time crunch for me because we've already been waiting for 6 years. We're kind of in it now, and I definitely think that Director Cummings' offer to do more listening sessions is overdue because in my ward, like half of the people who desperately need this parking have moved out by now or lost their homes or any number of other situations aren't the same people who need overnight parking for their needs. So I do think we should be listening to the people. If that starts with a listening session, that's great. I just wish it would have started with this chamber.
Thank you. Yes, Alderman Gaveva.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is tough. I totally understand where I see both sides of really this argument. I truly don't really find the objections at DPW to be valid. I think in other parts of the city, you look and you adapt, and I think that's exactly what would happen here is you figure out what you can do. I mean, it's a challenge, but it's nothing you couldn't overcome and nothing you don't overcome in other parts of the city. Hearing that this has been going on for 6 years, and then today we had one of Alderman Jetty's residents reach out to the committee saying that this conversation's been going on for 3.5 years, just about. I think that's hard to hear, and I think that's tough. Like, I got on this board for a reason, and it was to get some of these longer term projects done, stuff that was held up and has just been pushed off and waiting and waiting and waiting. I think it's time that, listening sessions are great, but I think there needs to be action. And I think we have time where we can do this. I'm just I'm tied right now. I probably have a dozen streets in my ward that would also fall under this almost exact kind of makeup where overnight parking would make sense. And I know if we open the can of worms on Colonial Ave, that will be probably the next thing I do is file at least 2 or 3 streets right off the top of my head that I know want it and have approached me in the past. So with that being said, I think I need more time to think on this. I don't see how this is really time sensitive at this time. I'm fine with maybe tabling and bringing this up in the new year and following what Director Cummings' plan was, but I don't want to see this die. I have a hard time going against what neighbors want. The neighborhood clearly wants it. They all signed the petition. So I just want to make sure we're logistically ready for it. I'm not a no by any means on this project at all. I think this is a great start and long overdue. I just don't think I'm ready to send this to the full board today. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we table O-23-064.
Okay. We have a motion to table. It's a non-debatable motion. It's a motion of the higher authority. So therefore, all those in favor of tabling O-23-064,
Could I ask for a roll call?
signify by saying aye.
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Roll call. Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Absolutely. Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderman Govea is a yes. Alderman Jettie.
No.
You have 3 yeas, 1 nay.
Okay, the ayes have it. I would like to thank everybody for both the city and my fellow aldermen for your testimony on it. It is an emotional issue. I know the committee has worked hard in the past. Alderman Jettie, I hope that we can get this resolved at the start of the new year and to work into this. I don't have objection. It cost me a lot of money to widen my driveway when my kids got licenses. I can understand that might be a hardship for some other families, but I conquered it myself, because we had to beat no on-street parking. So I think I'll be looking forward, and I'd like to thank Director Cummings on this issue. To have a meeting in the future, I'm going to look forward to it, that we need to get together and work with the common goal on this. Yes, it has been a long time, but it's been a lot longer since we had no on-street parking, since the last horse I went to the glue factory. There's never been on-street parking in the city. And the automobile's been around a long time. So it's gotta be tough. So bear with the committee on it. Yes, Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, I understand and appreciate, the committee members, what they said. I just want to point out that when you say there's never been parking, there is parking today. It's just not between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. So I think we lose sight of that fact. We lose sight of the fact, the problems that the DPW point out are problems under the current law can happen from 4 a.m. until 2 a.m. the next day. Cars can park there. And all the problems that they have with trash pickup, street sweeping, plowing, happen from 4 a.m. until 2 a.m. All this does is eliminate the parking for those 2 hours in the middle of the night. I think a lot of people don't appreciate that, but maybe they do. But thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Jettie. Okay, without objection, we can step right back and go right through the items on the agenda. And will the clerk bring up the next resolution, please?
Do you want to go through resolutions, or do you want to go through the rest of the ordinance?
Go to resolution, go right to the top of the agenda and follow the agenda forthwith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to recommend final passage of R-23-1177, authorizing the sale of a tax deed property located at 7 Ponderosa Ave.
Okay. I see CFO Griffin in the audience and Patty Barry. Would you like to step forward to speak on this, please?
Mr. Chairman, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. I'm here with Patty Barry. She is the Deputy Treasurer, Deputy Tax Collector. We've been here a number of times. As we discussed earlier, when you take some property and try to sell it, there's a few issues that happen along the way. But I would say that we've worked very hard with the team we have, legal in particular, and Ms. Barry is ready to discuss this particular piece of property. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Barry?
Thank you. So this property is 7 Ponderosa Ave. This former homeowner has been working with the New Hampshire Homeowners Assistance Fund, trying to repurchase the property. We have already received a check for $40,000 from the Homeowner Assistance Fund. It spells out in here that the homeowner would be responsible for paying an additional $1,000, and then the remaining $11,000 and change would be a mortgage to the city at 5% interest that would be payable upon the sale of the home. Had this homeowner come to us prior to the tax deed, he most likely would have qualified for a tax deferral, so this mortgage is mimicking a tax deferral.
Okay, that's it. Good. Any questions, members of the committee, other members of the board? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of final passage of R 23-177 signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Nothing. Resolution passes. The clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to recommend final passage of R-23-182, authorizing the sale of tax deed property located at 17 Jackson Street and L Bridge Street to Liberty Utilities.
Excuse me. CFO Griffin, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Ms. Barry will explain the intricacies of these particular properties as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So this property has been abandoned for many, many, many years. It is an abandoned warehouse with a lot next to it. The property is not accessible. It is behind the security gates of the Liberty utility. So it is in the best interest for both sides to enter into this agreement. There is quite a bit of taxes that are owed. As of tonight, there's a little over $628,000. The purchase price will not cover that, so the rest will have to be written off. But again, it is in best interest for both parties. This will be a difficult property to sell at auction.
Any further questions, members of the committee or members of the board? Yes, Alderman Jettie.
I'm sure it's here, but could you just help me? What is the price? What are we getting for it?
$250,000. The building does have to be demolished. It is in very rough shape. There's some environmental issues as well. Liberty Utility is willing to take on the cost of all that demolition and getting the property leveled. It's going to be quite the expense for them as well to do that.
Okay, can I
Follow up?
And I think I saw that there was asbestos discovered here. It's not surprising since the John Mansville was right there.
Right.
And that they will incur, they will take whatever cost is required to, the cost of removing whatever
Yes.
the asbestos is there.
Yes.
For Tom.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Gaveva?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question. With 600,000 owed in back taxes, is this the best possible thing we could do? Is there any way to recover any of that 600,000, or do you think we're kind of, if you are getting lucky with the price we're getting for it?
I think so.
Gotcha.
Alderman Lopez?
As the alderman for the area that's having all the fun with the tannery, if you find an environmental landmine lying around, I guess, then maybe we could also count the in-kind repair of that and the amelioration towards the value, and I feel like the city might really be getting a good deal if they're gonna handle all the asbestos remediation and all that.
Okay. Further questions from members of the committee or members of the board? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of R23 182 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business ordinances.
Thank you.
We're going to skip over 023 064, already discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move to recommend final approval of O-23-067, no parking on the west side of a section of Elm Street.
Okay. And Director Cummings, did you have anything to add on this, or, oh, excuse me, Director Sullivan? Thank you.
Usually the short stick.
I'm sorry for my confusion.
We're sitting back there looking at each other. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'll offer a few brief comments, but admittedly, this legislative change predates me, and I know that the parking manager, Jill Stansfield, has had significant issues with this in the past, as well as has Bobby Bagley in Public Health. Essentially, this is a modification to remove parking on the west side of Elm Street as you're taking the left from Kinsley onto Elm Street, where the Public Health building is on your left-hand side. There are a few reasons for this, in fact, both from Public Health and from the Transit Department, and certainly if we could pull it up, I think that will be helpful. But I believe this originated with a concern from our Transit Department making that left-hand turn from Kinsley onto Elm. Due to the location of parked cars there, they were having a significant issue with vehicle clearance. And so what this change proposes to do is to actually eliminate a section of parking as described within the ordinance to remove a piece of parking directly abutting that intersection of Kinsley and Elm. But in fact, it serves another purpose, and certainly this is one that I think Ms. Stansfield could speak to if asked any questions this evening, and that is, in fact, parking is being backed up along that area all the way to the Public Health building where they have an access onto the property. And they often park some vehicles in that front area as well. Parking is actually backing up to the extent where it's blocking that entrance and exit area. And so we're proposing to remove parking all the way back to before that location along Elm Street. So again, there are really two driving forces behind this. One, the ability of our transit vehicles to make that left-hand turn based on the location of cars both in the right-of-way and in the parked area. And then two, to address a blocking concern that exists at the Public Health facility as well. And I'd offer Ms. Stansfield certainly here to answer any other questions that might arise, but those are the two fundamental purposes behind this. I would just note that as you see in your packet before you this evening, the engineering department certainly weighed in on this and actually drafted the language as part of the ordinance, and so they're certainly in support of what's being proposed here as well. Thank you.
Okay, questions from members of the committee or the board to either Director Sullivan or Parking Administrator Stanfield? Alderman Lopez.
Two clarifying questions, since I did help sponsor the legislation. The first is a pretty low softball, as have the buses gotten any bigger in recent history? And the second one is particularly regarding not just the turning, but also the potential parked cars blocking entrance to the health department. Would that be a concern for the fire department trying to get access, or any kind of ambulance access.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Certainly, thank you, Alderman Lopez. Two questions there. The first question, the buses have not gotten larger. In fact, if anything, we're actually moving our fleet away from the large size buses that you might see. We have several size buses, believe it or not. We're moving away from those larger ones towards a smaller sub 30-foot bus that you see around. Those are some of our hybrid vehicles as well. And so our long-term plan is to use the smaller pieces of apparatus. That said, even those, the turning radius is not great, quite honestly, and so that conflict still exists even with the smaller pieces of equipment. And relative to the question about fire access to the public health building, I can't speak for our fire department, but I know, being part of conversations with them, any obstacle between the right-of-way and a building is viewed as a potential impediment to properly fighting a fire. And so if there's a vehicle parked there, whether that's on the public health property or in the right-of-way, that only adds complication. And so by eliminating parking, Alderman Lopez, it does address one more barrier that might exist to effectively fighting fire on the property.
Thank you. And I imagine the same would apply to like first responders, like EMTs and that kind of stuff?
That's correct, yes. I think anyone accessing the building, whether for a fire, an emergency incident, the ability to quickly park or curb mount there, I think it's helped by the fact that parking is removed, yes.
Okay, further questions, Alderman Dow?
I'm go around this corner every time I come to this building, and that's been quite a few times. And I agree that we should get the parking out of there because that is a very tight turn, even for cars, never mind buses. But you can see the stop line, the white line on there. I don't think it's that clear right now. And I think the street markings and signage ought to be such to keep the cars back, because even with doing away with the parking, you're still gonna have a problem making that turn if the car is all the way out to the crosswalk. So I think that's also has to be looked at.
Further, Alderman Jettie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I could, through you, ask the ward alderman, given the discussion we just had, I'm wondering about the availability of parking for the residents in that area. Is that something that you feel comfortable with? Isn't there another way of dealing with this problem by making Elm Street one way in that area? I mean, there are parts of Elm Street that are one way going north, and there are other parts that go south, I believe. And so I've always found Elm Street kind of be a
Blow that out
confusing
a bit.
street. Has there been any?
Alderman Jettie, you do know that that section is adjacent within a comfortable walking distance to the parking lot that is behind the former Nashua Bakery, the yellow building. So there's tons of parking. Am I correct, Director Sullivan?
You are correct. There's a significant surface parking asset. In the urban environment, though, every parking space is sacred. No question about that, particularly here. I should have started with this. This is a loss of 2 parking spaces for this particular removal. And certainly those may be critical, but I think here the public safety risk, I think, public safety risk here outweighs the need for those 2 parking spaces. And I think that's the fundamental, foundation of this proposal. But certainly there is a loss of 2 spaces, yes.
Follow up?
Yes, so my other question was, what about making it one way?
Would you like me to address that?
Go ahead.
I'm not laughing at the question at all. There's several challenges with it. One is that much of the circulation in this area surrounding this critical sort of north-south connection is one way already. And so by making this one way, we would produce more circuitous traffic patterns in the area. But also, one-ways are interesting. And I don't want to say that we'll never propose them ever again, but one-way patterns are something that I would say the urban planning community and other urban design folks are moving away from. because in many cases they contribute to higher speed traffic, and therefore they are sort of inherently anti-pedestrian and anti-walkable community. And so my hesitation to going to one-way here is that I actually think we might increase speed. We might address some of the vehicle-to-vehicle conflicts by going one way, but inherently I think it may increase or decrease the safety along this corridor as we increase speed of vehicles by going one way and decreasing the walkability of that area as well. So that would be my hesitation, Alderman Jettie. That said, would it provide more room for parking? Certainly it would, but I think it could have impacts on the circulation of this area. We just haven't had time to study, but ignoring that, I think it could be a potential safety concern as well with the speed of traffic that's introduced.
If I could
Follow up?
Yeah, so when you're talking about making it easier for the buses to turn, if you eliminated the opposite traffic, it would, I would think it would accomplish that. But this is not my ward. This is Alderman Lopez's ward, and if he's okay with it, I'm okay with it. But
Mr. Chair, can I speak?
Director Sullivan?
I know Alderman Lopez would like to make a comment, but I would just say this southbound route is particularly critical for our buses because as they exit the transit center, it's difficult for them to get to the east side of the community because they either have to go north out to the Walnut Street Oval and loop back around, or instead they can take the left hand and go directly down Elm and then take a left-hand turn onto Otterson or other routes down here. And so, onto Kinsley. So that turning movement, that left out of the transit center and down Elm Street is particularly critical, so it may have implications on our bus routes as well. So I think that's part of my hesitation.
Alderman Lopez?
So to answer my fellow alderman's question, the short answer for do I think that there's enough parking in that area is no. That's why I've been fighting for 6 years to get any kind of additional parking in that area. But I think the solution probably has more to do with better using those parking lots, or I've even proposed decommissioning a couple of streets that might not be quite as useful. But the Elm Street School project is extremely influential in that area. So that's been a complication. The other side of the coin, though, is that those neighborhoods do rely very, very heavily on bus transportation, too. And, I mean, you can't, moving 2 parking spaces to allow a bus to travel more safely, or even a fire truck or ambulance to the public health building, I think those have to be priorities.
Thank you. Further questions, members of the board? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance 23-067 passes. The clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move to recommend final passage of O-23-068, authorizing traffic and parking changes on Water Street.
Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. There's a plan that I'd like to pull up, and as that is appearing on the screen, I want to take an opportunity to apologize to Alderman Lopez. This one got away from me, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him in advance of the filing, so I apologize, Alderman Lopez. But this legislation does nothing different than what we've discussed in the past. It is what we've been discussing over the last 4 or 5 years when we've been talking about designing the riverfront specifically, and to be able to accomplish the park redesign as outlined, we knew we were going to need to conceptualize Water Street differently. And so this plan, developed by our engineering department in conjunction with their outside consultants, does exactly that, where we move the parking spaces from the park area up onto Water Street. On-street parking is now achieved in this design. To do that, we are going to need to make Water Street from a 2-way street to a 1-way, and we would be going from Main Street out to Factory And we took a lot of consultation in before making any of these design changes, spoke to all the various departments. The fire department in particular asked that we make that particular change. We have had conversations with all the various butters and property owners in the area. They're aware of this change. Last thing I do want to note is what we're talking about is Water Street specifically. Anything that happens underneath Water Street is not being discussed here. An issue arose earlier today that I just want to put a finer point on is there is some parking underneath the quote-unquote on-ramp. That is not changing. This all has to do with Water Street itself. And so those individual organizations that utilize that type of parking on the on-ramp side, need not worry. Now, when you cross over onto Clock Tower, not sketched out here in this design, I do want to be clear, I anticipate those parking spaces needing to change, but we've been in full consultation with Clock Tower, and they're aware of those changes that need to occur. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for your favorable recommendation this evening. We can't proceed to construction until we know that there is agreement on this and that we can get the design packages out to construction sometime after the first of the year. We're hoping that this legislation gets adopted. So with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions, members of the committee? Alderman Lopez.
As the most dramatic member, I appreciate getting the opportunity to speak. So I appreciate Director Cummings' acknowledgement that, as the ward alderman, I would just want to be briefed on these and able to prepare the communities that would be directly involved. I think this is a big change for the immediate businesses in that area and the traffic flow pattern. I'm particularly concerned about people coming off of the Oval where there's been a lot of construction. Not Oval, whatever we're going to call that Pennachuck rhomboid thing.
Walnut Street Oval.
Yeah, Walnut Street Oval.
Walnut Street Oval, yep.
Walnut Street Oval. So there's been a lot of construction over there, and I think generally the public doesn't know what's going on exactly, and whether it's the stuff directly on the Oval, whether it's the School Street flats, and I just want to make sure that when we're presenting legislation like this or any kind of major street planning changes, we're doing it in a way that lets the public really know we're moving streets around and we're changing things. Because changing a two-way street to a one-way street in that particular area is going to be a bit of a shock to some people. My concerns were with the businesses, but also with the residents that are there. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the Delena's House is a program for veterans which is run by an organization, but people live there. There's permanent housing programs, there's the emergency shelter programs, there's the transitional programs, and a lot of the people there have particular medical needs or mobility issues where we can't just move their parking around or even put them in the same plight that a lot of people in the tree streets are in, where they have to walk a considerable distance because they may not be able to. So I want to make sure that we are communicating this effectively to any stakeholders in the immediate area. I'm glad Clock Tower is in the loop on what's going on and that their residents will be consulted as well. I don't really have a problem with the overall plan as it's presented, because as it has been pointed out, it has been touched upon repeatedly over the last couple of years. I just want it to be presented in a consolidated way, exactly as is being done tonight, so that I can make sure that my communities know what's going on. And then I do have one quick clarifying question. How would if I'm missing where the parking is, the parking looks like it's right on Water Street, and that area is just continually going up. If it's the one over the Be Grateful mural, how do people get to and from that? I think the sidewalk is on the other side.
Well, there's a sidewalk. I just want to be clear. Where are you referencing?
Up on the ramp, the first half of it looks like it's got parking on it.
Yep. And there'd be a sidewalk, be reconstructed.
Okay, so we put one on.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, well,
Yep.
anybody like fall off the end or anything?
Yep. And so a couple other points, Mr. Chairman, if I could, to address Alderman Lopez's comments. One, we will absolutely redouble our efforts to communicate in and around that area. Happy to do that. Don't want folks caught by surprise. Second is we owe you a downtown circulation study update. And so I believe one of the last times I was before the Infrastructure Committee in October, I had said that we had finished that study. I had given an update on various projects and whatnot. That one, we didn't get into any detail, but happy to do that at your next infrastructure committee meeting if you'd like, where we can set up a time and have a more robust, detailed, comprehensive conversation, because this is the start of what could be a triggering event of many other circulation conversations that I believe that this body is due, and hopefully then we can continue that conversation out with the general public, and I would welcome that opportunity.
Okay, Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple questions. In where the parking is now not beneath, but I guess next to the ramp, some of those are leased spaces. It looks like we're moving those to the street. Is the street parking gonna be leased as well? Like, are those leases going with the?
So my recommendation would be is to leave the on-street metered, but right across from the on-street, literally right across the street from it, we do have a public parking lot, and those could be the leased spaces.
So is that the plan?
That would be the plan.
And there's enough to
Yep.
swap out?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
If I could continue.
Follow up?
Yeah, I think, I support this 100%. I think it's a good plan, in particular because, right now, when you go down Water Street and you're trying to make a left-hand turn onto Main Street, normally the traffic backs up pretty bad anyway, and it's actually quicker to go the other way.
Down factory to a left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the fact that this will enable us to be able to open up that land by the river to be, a park, and then utilize the street for the parking that's there, I think is an ideal plan. I'm not concerned about the traffic or anything like that. I think, if anything, I think this definitely will resolve some of the traffic issues that we have now. So I'm in full support of this. Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, just draw back on my logistics. I think it'd be a good idea to put up signage 15 to 30 days ahead of time saying that the direction of the street's going to be changed, so that as many people as you can will be informed about the upcoming change, and you won't have as many issues by all of a sudden one day it's a one-way street.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, if we can get to a point where we get a consensus and this does change, there would be a robust communication plan, as you've described. And once we know when we would go under construction and this change would occur, I believe we would absolutely give as much notice as possible, 30 days, 60 days, whatever the appropriate time is that our consultants tell us. I might lean on my DPW friends to put some messaging board signs out, because absolutely, we would want to get that message communicated. We'd do something like put stuff up on the cable access as well.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, just briefly, actually, that brings up a point I forgot. What is the time? Can you give me a timeline on this? And that's the first question. And the second question would be, what would it entail? Like, would the street be closed for a period of time? How would that affect anybody that's parking there, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. I am being told, and we're working fast and furiously to get bid documents out after the first of the year, with the idea of starting construction this spring, this summer. I think it's pretty fair to say that this street would get turned off, and we would need to shut it down for certain periods of time to be able to execute on the streetscaping plan. We would give as much notice as possible to folks to ensure that that is all in place, and particularly those who utilize the parking lot. So we're going to need to get this in the ideal scenario, and of course a lot of this is going to be up to our contractors when they actually tell us how they will do it with means and method. But We believe that we really need to do the streetscaping in advance to provide people the various parking options necessary before we do the park. And so that's why getting the Water Street streetscaping done before we even touch the park would be the prioritization.
Follow up?
Yeah, I may be getting into the nitty-gritty of things, but obviously, they would have to account for the fact that, Mechanic Street is a one-way when you're closing down that area. So do you anticipate that the entire section would be closed, or would that parking lot be accessed by Mechanic Street somehow with a temporary?
I would defer to the traffic professionals and the construction group when they actually outline the plan. Without checking with them, my guess would be it would be a phased approach. So I'm assuming that they would either do a segment and Mechanic would be a natural break, or they're going to look at it as north-south, and they're going to do one section to the north and then one section to the south, or they'll break it up east-west, but it will be broken up. Just not exactly sure how.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Jettie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you need messaging signs, we've got a surplus of them in Ward 5, which we'd be happy to let you use for as long as you want.
Duly noted.
Secondly, and this is just as serious, you know that Director Sullivan is against one-way streets. You heard him say that, right?
No, yeah.
No, so they're moving away from it, that's also a one-way street, so they can't turn around.
But seriously, so so right now, Water Street is two ways.
Yep.
And when you're going westerly on Water Street, so going from Main Street over to Factory Street,
South on Main?
from Main Street on Water Street,
So
southwesterly.
southwest, yep.
So when you get to Factory Street,
Yep.
so right now it's two-way traffic, so you're in the right lane,
Mhm.
and there's a yield sign,
Yes.
right?
Is it yield?
And-
Is it yield or a stop sign? But yes,
yield.
there's something, right,
Yield.
controlling it, yep, yep.
Yield. And so with this proposal, you're making it one-way, so it's going to be going from Main Street to, south westerly to Factory Street, only in that direction. So I assume that when you get to Factory Street, there are two lanes, there are going to be two lanes, and one takes a right onto Factory Street, and you're
West,
going west.
yep.
And the other, right now, you cannot take a left onto Factory Street, but you will with
Mhm.
these changes.
Mhm.
But you're changing you're doing away with the yield sign, and you're making it a stop sign.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
And I'm wondering why you would not allow, the traffic to flow, onto Factory Street. Why would they have to stop there, number one? Number two, you're not putting a stop sign on the other corner. It would seem to me the traffic turning left onto Factory Street, you would want to stop. So I'm just wondering if, wouldn't it be better to put the stop sign on the left side, which would be the south easterly corner, and put a yield sign on the north, the south westerly side? Or if you're concerned about pedestrians, you're not, yield to pedestrian sign or
Yeah.
something like that. But I think you need to stop the traffic that's turning left onto Factory Street.
Yeah.
And with this proposed legislation, you're not providing for that, I don't think.
I would have to double check Alderman Jettie, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So what I think we will discover is after we implement, there may be some tweaks and adjustments necessary. That this is a good example as to once City Engineer Hudson gets a chance to evaluate it, he may opt to move in that direction, and I defer to him and the other traffic engineers. And this is what they've recommended to date, and so that's why we're going in this direction. I understand your point and comment, and I will definitely bring it back to the group. My guess is, without talking to anyone in consultation, is I believe it's the site distances in this area is pretty tough. And so I don't know, maybe that changes to some degree, that then allows for some nuances to occur because some grading may change or may not change. I don't know. But I do know that in that area, particularly in that intersection, there's some concerns about particularly speeds on Factory Street getting to a certain certain speed level, and then having a merge with water, and then just up and beyond the sketch here that you're seeing, there's actually, I believe, like a crosswalk that you clock tower to Factory occurs behind the Cadis building where the River Casino is. And so I think that all kind of came into play in terms of how they arrived at this design, but I absolutely could see us tweaking it after there's some real life assessment.
Could I just
Follow up?
Yeah, so I would like us to do that before we pass this ordinance. I mean, can you talk to them about it and see whether any tweaking needs to be done before it goes before the full board?
Yeah, happy to. I can be more than happy to have a conversation with City Engineer Hudson, understand what the rationale was, communicate it back to you. Obviously, there wouldn't be the real-life practical experience because this wouldn't have been constructed, but I can just give you the rationale or the design intention.
Thank you.
Alderman Dow, did you have?
No, I was just gonna say that all of this is gonna be determined by Engineer Hudson
All right.
on it.
All right.
So whatever ends it up being, it's going to be by his recommendation, and I also don't think they allow you to go through two crossing lanes without stopping. Crosswalks.
Work in progress. Alderman Lopez.
I would just want to remind anybody who's doing the planning here to look at the curb cuts up on Water Street and Factory. For some reason, curb cuts on one side of Clock Tower's lot and the building that's on the end of it, like, stops in the middle of a parking space, so somebody in a scooter ends up going down the street and can't quite make it over to where they want to go. And that intersection is missing one as well, so you can get off and then suddenly find yourself like stranded and not sure where you're going. So the curb cut should be something we're looking at if we're fixing any kind of sidewalks in this area. And then last, just a question. There's parking up on that ramp. Was that contemplated to be overnight parking?
I do not know how Water Street reads right now. I would think it would comply with the D1 overnight parking, so that would probably be something that from a regulatory standpoint could occur, but that would take a separate piece of legislation. I don't know if it's actually contemplated in the legislation before you this evening.
Okay, just thought I should check.
Further comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
There's an item tabled in committee, but nobody's made any inkling to get it off. General discussion. We'll start here. Alderman Lopez,
I have no.
Alderman Jettie, Alderman Clements, Alderman Dow, Alderman Kaveva, and I'm good too. Public comment. Seeing no member of the public, We'll move on. Remarks by Alderman? Seeing none. Alderman Guevara, do you have a motion?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. The Committee on Infrastructure will be in adjournment, and I'll call it at 8:25. I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening.